My name is August Tors. I am 39 years old, and at 9:05 a.m. on a Wednesday that smelled of ozone from the server rooms and the distant promise of rain over the Santa Cruz Mountains, my life's work was stolen by an automated notification. The pop-up appeared on my screen without a sound, a sterile little box in the bottom right corner. Sender: Viridian Organics HR Systems. Subject: Project Leadership Restructuring Notice. It had the cold, bloodless finality of a flatline. For a full minute, I didn't move. My hand was frozen on the lab-grade mouse, the cursor hovering over a complex gene sequence. The ambient hum of the Viridian Organics R&D campus, the gentle whisper of the climate control in the seed labs, the distant whir of the gene sequencers, the quiet murmur of my colleagues, all of it seemed to fade into a dull, underwater roar. The world was normal, which made the words on the screen feel like a tear in the fabric of reality. I clicked. The notice was a masterpiece of corporate non-language, polished to a frictionless sheen to avoid lawsuits. It talked of synergy, of strategic alignment, of positioning the company for a new era of market leadership. It thanked me for my foundational contributions. And then, in the third paragraph, it named my replacement as the lead for the Helios project, Julian Croft. Julian Croft. The name hung there on the screen, a perfect symbol of the company's soulless new direction. I, August Tors, the plant geneticist who had conceived of and built Helios from a single, radical idea in a university greenhouse 3 years before Viridian Organics even knew my name, was being replaced by a vice president of global branding whose primary scientific skill was choosing the Pantone color for a new logo. I had created a miracle of biology. He was going to put it in a shinier box and sell it. There was no transition plan, no meeting request, no ask for a handover of my research data. It was a clean amputation. A cold, sharp curiosity pierced through the shock. I opened the company's internal network. I tried to access the Helios project's core genetic database, the one I had built from scratch. A new window popped up. Access denied. User privileges insufficient. I navigated to my own profile in the company directory. My title, Chief Scientist, Helios Project, was gone. Next to my name, a new tag had appeared in gray, italicized letters: External Consultant Terminated. In the space of 5 minutes, I had become a ghost in the machine I had created. A profound, chilling stillness settled over me. There was no rage yet, only a strange, detached clarity. I pushed my chair back. The open concept lab stretched out before me, a landscape I knew better than my own home. The precise angle of the morning sun through the triple-paned glass, the scent of nutrient solution and sterile soil, the low thrum of $100 million of equipment working in concert. But now it felt alien, like a memory of a place I once knew. As I stood and walked towards the central atrium, a silent wave of motion rippled ahead of me. Dr. Evans, who had worked with me for months on the drought resistance markers, suddenly became fascinated by the contents of a Petri dish. Sarah, from the legal team, who had helped me navigate the initial patent paperwork, abruptly turned and walked the other way, her phone pressed to her ear. They knew. The notification hadn't just come to me. The air in the atrium was thick with the smell of fresh coffee and the cloying scent of a new marketing display. A giant, backlit poster of a smiling, affluent couple holding a perfect tomato. The tagline read, "Helios, the taste of a better world." They had been in here planning this, planning the future of my creation without me. The thought didn't sting. It was simply a data point. I returned to my desk. The silence around my workstation was now a palpable force field. A new notification was blinking on my screen. It was an internal memo from Julian Croft, sent to the entire company. The subject line was a declaration of conquest. The new era of Viridian, Helios. It was a masterclass in revisionist history. It talked about harnessing the power of Helios to capture the premium organic market. It announced him as the new visionary lead. My name was nowhere. Not once. It was like watching someone expertly airbrush you out of your own life's photograph. Optimize the brand narrative. He was talking about a seed that could end famine as if it were a new flavor of sparkling water. Helios wasn't a narrative. It was a genetically engineered marvel, a seed that could thrive in arid soil, fix its own nitrogen, and produce crop yields 40% higher than anything on the market. It was a beautiful, complex machine of pure biology, and he wanted to streamline the messaging. My phone buzzed. A private message from Mark Chen, the interim CEO, a finance guy, a placeholder. His message was a monument to corporate cowardice. "August," it read, Heard the news went out. Just a minor realignment to better integrate science with brand strategy. No reflection on your brilliant work. Let's be sure to maintain a positive relationship moving forward. Maintain a positive relationship. He had erased me with a system notification and was now texting me about staying friends. I didn't reply. I set the phone face down. My gaze drifted back to my calendar, still open on the screen. My week had been wiped clean. Meetings, lab schedules, presentations, all gone, all except one. There it was, an oversight, a beautiful, fatal oversight. Thursday, 10:00 a.m. Meeting, Helios Supply Contract Finalization. Host, August Tours. Attendees, Veridian Organics Legal Global Food Initiative, GFI, the Global Food Initiative, the first major humanitarian licensing deal. The $80 million entry point to a supply chain that independent analysts had valued at $350 million over the next 5 years. They had forgotten to remove me as the technical host. They had left me holding the keys to the kingdom, just as they were shoving me out the door. The cold stillness inside me began to harden into something else, something sharp and clear and dense. I swiveled in my chair and turned to the gray, 2-drawer filing cabinet tucked under my desk. My fingers found the small silver key I kept in a hidden compartment of my wallet. The lock turned with a well-oiled click. I bypassed the folders on experiment timelines and budget reports. I was looking for a specific file, one labeled simply TAR LLC. Inside, beneath a copy of my LLC formation documents, was a 12-page document, my original employment agreement with Veridian, and clipped to the back of it, a 3-page addendum. I slid it out. The paper was heavy, archival quality. The title at the top was unambiguous, Breeders' Rights Addendum, Helios Field of Use Exclusive. I scanned the familiar paragraphs, the dense legalese I had spent weeks crafting with my own lawyer before I ever signed their offer. My eyes landed on the critical clause. Section 4C, Reversion on Dismissal Without Notice. It read, in the event of the inventor's removal from a leadership role on the Helios project, or the stripping of public attribution of her work, without a mutually agreed-upon transition period of no less than 60 days, Veridian Organics' exclusive field of use license shall automatically revert to a non-exclusive license. The inventor, via her designated legal entity, shall have the right to cure this reversion within a 72-hour window by restoring the inventor's role and attribution. Failure to cure will result in the immediate and permanent termination of all licensing rights held by Veridian Organics. I smoothed the paper flat on my desk. At the bottom of the last page were 2 signatures. Mine and the elegant, confident script of the company's founder, Eleanor Vance, the woman who had hired me. The woman who understood that to get the golden eggs, you had to keep the goose not just happy, but in charge. She had signed it in her signature emerald green fountain pen ink, a vivid slash of life against the black laser-printed text. A promise. I took my phone and switched it to camera mode. I didn't take a picture of the whole document. I framed the shot tightly, capturing only Section 4C and Eleanor's green ink signature below it. The image was sharp, undeniable. I saved it to a secure folder. I leaned back in my chair. The noise of the lab returned, but it sounded different now. It was the sound of a machine running on borrowed time. They had made a mistake. They thought they were just firing a scientist. They thought the asset was the seed, the lab, the brand name they were so eager to optimize. They forgot. Helios doesn't belong to Veridian Organics. Helios belongs to Tours Agricultural Research, LLC, and I am Tours Agricultural Research, LLC. This fortress I had built, this elegant trap, wasn't the product of a single afternoon's anger. It was constructed molecule by molecule, clause by clause, over 2 years of careful observation and cold calculation. It began long before Veridian Organics ever knew my name. It started in a cramped university greenhouse, a converted space that overlooked the rain-slicked streets of Seattle. For years, I had been obsessed with a single problem: the fragility of the global food supply. Industrial agriculture was a miracle, but it was a miracle built on a knife's edge, dependent on perfect weather and massive inputs of water and fertilizer. I wanted to build a safety net into our crops themselves. I wanted to give them the tools to survive. I wanted to build a seed that didn't just grow, but endured. I called it Helios. 6 months before Eleanor Vance, Veridian's then CEO, first called me, I finalized the core gene sequence. It was 4 in the morning. I remember the quiet hum of the PCR machine, the taste of stale coffee, and a feeling of profound, earth-shaking certainty. Before I went to sleep, before I told a single soul, I logged into the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's online portal. Acting as Tor's Agricultural Research, LLC, a legal entity I had established for this exact purpose, I filed a provisional utility patent for the Helios gene sequence. That digital timestamp was the first brick in the wall. It established, in the eyes of the law, that Helios was mine before I ever walked through their gleaming corporate lobby. When Viridian came courting, they came on strong. Elinor was a rare breed of CEO, a botanist by training who could actually understand the science she was selling. She saw what Helios was, not just an improvement, but a paradigm shift. She also saw me, the sole architect, the single point of failure and success. She wanted both locked down tight. The negotiation was a careful dance. They offered a breathtaking salary, stock options, a title. I listened patiently. When they were finished, I slid a single-page term sheet across the table. "I'm not interested in becoming a standard employee," I said. "I am the founder of this technology. Tor's Agricultural Research, LLC will license it to Viridian." Their lawyers balked. They wanted a full IP assignment, a work-for-hire agreement. They wanted to own Helios. "That's not on the table," I replied, my voice even. "What is on the table is an exclusive license, but a limited one." I proceeded to define the limits. A field of use restriction. They could use Helios for one purpose and one purpose only: commercial agriculture in North America and Europe. Any other application, humanitarian aid, developing markets, government contracts, remained the sole property of my LLC. They were getting the keys to the Lamborghini, but I was keeping the title and the keys to the rest of the cars in the garage. Elinor, to her credit, understood. "She's not giving us the factory," she told her legal team. "She's giving us a dedicated assembly line. For the price, it's the deal of a lifetime." Then I laid down the most important brick. "There is one more condition," I said, "a non-negotiable one." I explained my reversion clause. I had seen too many brilliant founders and scientists pushed out of their own companies once the corporate machine took over. The people who built the value were often the first to be deemed redundant by the people who merely packaged and sold it. My clause was an insurance policy against that uniquely American corporate tragedy. If they ever removed me from a leadership position on my own project without notice, or if they erased my name from it, their exclusive license would detonate. It would revert to non-exclusive, and if they didn't fix the breach in 72 hours by restoring my position and my name, the license would be terminated. Permanently. Their general counsel called it draconian. I called it an alignment of interests. Elinor saw the logic. "She's the asset," she argued. "The clause ensures we don't mismanage our most valuable asset. What are we worried about? As long as we treat her right, it's just ink on paper." To cement my position, I added another layer. I told them that as part of the deal, my LLC would be filing a UCC-1 financing statement with the state. A UCC-1 is a tool for lenders. It places a public lien on an asset, securing a creditor's interest. In this case, the asset was the Helios patent. The debtor was Viridian Organics. The creditor was my LLC. The loan agreement was my employment contract. If they defaulted on its terms, by firing me without notice, for example, my claim to repossess the patent would legally precede the claims of almost all their other investors or partners. I wasn't just licensing them my technology. I was holding it as collateral. Once the agreement was signed with Elinor Vance's bold green ink, I began the final stage of my preparations. I compiled every piece of documentation related to the negotiation, every email, every redlined version of the contract, and a crucial email from their general counsel stating, "Per our agreement, Viridian will ensure August Tours is credited as inventor and chief architect of the Helios engine in all public-facing technical documentation." I loaded all of it onto a military-grade encrypted external hard drive. I then ran the entire data package through a digital notary service, which appended a cryptographically secure timestamp to every file. This was my seed vault. It lived in a fireproof safe in my home, completely disconnected from Viridian's network, immune to their IT department, their server wipes, and their corporate revisionist history. It was my copy of the truth. I remember my last conversation with Elinor after the papers were all signed. She shook my hand and said, "I'm glad we could get this done, August. You fought hard for your credit." I looked her in the eye and shook her hand firmly. "I don't need to fight for credit, Elinor," I told her. I just need to preserve the truth. Now, sitting at my desk, the ghost of that conversation echoing in my ears, I look at the screen. Julian is talking about a new era for Veridian. Mark Chen is texting about maintaining a positive relationship. They are living in a world of pleasant fictions. They have forgotten that their right to even use the word Helios is built on a foundation of hard legal truth, and they just took a sledgehammer to it. The first public blow landed at 9:45 a.m. It was a company-wide email from Julian. Its subject line, a declaration of conquest, a new era for Veridian, Helios. My name was nowhere in it. The memo itself was a masterclass in corporate revisionism, filled with energetic prose about synergy and forward momentum. It announced him as the new lead for the Helios initiative, effective immediately. Reading it was like watching someone airbrush you out of a photograph. One moment you're there, the next, just empty space. The memo was the first formal, documented breach of the attribution clause. I downloaded a PDF copy and saved it. Breach number 1. Minutes later, a second assault arrived, this time with a wider blast radius. An email from the Investor Relations Department, a draft of an investor presentation intended for their quarterly strategic update. The distribution list was limited to senior staff, a list from which I had not yet been purged. I opened the attached document. The headline on slide 3 was, Veridian Organics unveils proprietary Helios seed engine. The body copy was even more egregious. It described Helios as a wholly owned, in-house intellectual property, the result of years of internal development by Veridian's dedicated R&D teams. It was a complete fabrication, a clumsy, arrogant lie designed to be repeated on earnings calls until it became the truth. They weren't just erasing me. They were trying to erase Tor's Agricultural Research, LLC, from existence. I saved the draft presentation. Breach number 2. The third blow was a quiet technical one, delivered by the silent, automated hands of the IT department. A notification from our genetic sequence repository system appeared in my inbox. The subject was stark. Repository ownership transferred. The log read, permission change, repository, Helios core sequence, owner updated from ATORS to J-Croft by system administrator. In the digital world where the work actually lived, my name had been chiseled off the cornerstone and replaced. They had seized the digital factory, but their control was an illusion. The original blueprints, the notarized and timestamped proofs of creation, were safe in the seed vault miles away and 1,000,000 miles beyond their reach. Still, it was breach number 3. 3 violations in less than an hour. They were efficient, I had to give them that. Then came the overreach. The move that transformed their campaign from a brutal corporate ousting into a fatal strategic blunder. An email from Veridian Legal. Subject, your separation agreement. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. It was presented as a standard exit package, complete with a generous severance offer. Hush money. But buried deep in the boilerplate on page 9, paragraph 16, subsection D, was the poison pill. The clause was a dense thicket of legalese, but its meaning was unmistakable. By signing, I would be agreeing to retroactively waive all moral rights of authorship, and would affirm that any and all intellectual property created during my tenure was expressly and irrevocably considered work for hire, superseding any and all prior agreements, written or verbal. I read the words twice. They weren't just firing me, they were trying to trick me into legally validating their theft. This document was their confession. It was an admission that they knew their claim to Helios was fragile, and this was their desperate, clumsy attempt to shore it up after the fact. They were trying to get me to sign away the very foundations of my power. I almost laughed. Did they think I was that naive? Or that desperate? My fingers moved with a calm, deliberate speed. I did not reply to the legal department. I did not click decline or delete. Instead, I opened a new email in my Veridian account. I addressed it to my personal, encrypted Proton Mail address. In the subject line, I typed a simple private reference, Evidence Locker, VDN breach. I attached 2 files. The first was the poisonous separation agreement they had just sent me. The second was the crisp, clear photograph I had taken less than an hour ago, Section 4, C of my breeder's rights addendum, with Alina Vance's defiant green signature at the bottom. I hit send. The email vanished from my outbox. A perfect digital package containing their crime and my weapon, now safely stored outside their walls. The universe, it seems, has a flair for dramatic timing. At precisely 10:02 a.m., a new email appeared. It was from a senior director at the Global Food Initiative, the $80 million canary in the coal mine. Good morning, August, it began, entirely unaware of the demolition taking place on the R&D campus. Looking forward to our call tomorrow. Just a quick follow-up. As a final point of due diligence, before our finance committee signs off on the initial $80 million supply contract, our council requires a final confirmation of the registered owner of USPTO utility PAT application number 9,345,121, Helios gene sequence. Could you please send over the relevant documentation at your convenience? I stared at the email, a slow smile spreading across my face for the first time that morning. They had handed me a lighted match and pointed me toward the fuse. Before I could even begin to formulate a plan, my Slack icon blinked with an incoming direct message. It was Julian. August, his message began, dispensing with any pleasantries. I see it hasn't removed you from the GFI invite yet. That's fine. I will be leading the call now. I need you to join, but you are not to speak unless I address you directly. If they have any deep technical questions, I'll throw them to you. Keep your camera off. I'll introduce you as an internal technical consultant. It's critical we maintain a clean, unified message. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it was a thing to behold. He had publicly erased my name, presided over the theft of my work, and now wanted to use me as a disembodied, anonymous brain in a box to secure the funding for his new empire. He wanted me to perform as a technical puppet at my own execution. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I considered the options: a long, scathing reply, a detailed explanation of his mistake, but none of that was necessary. The most powerful move was the simplest. I typed a single word and pressed enter. No, the word sat in the chat window between us, stark and absolute, a digital line drawn in the sand. I could almost feel his shock through the screen. He was a person who was not accustomed to being told no. He was typing, then he stopped. Then he started again. While his reply was forming, I sent my follow-up. I said nothing. I simply clicked the paperclip icon and attached the photo from my phone, the image of the reversion clause and a leaner signature. I hit send. The image populated in the chat window, a stark black and white contract with a slash of emerald green ink, a prophecy he had never bothered to read. And in that moment, the entire axis of the day shifted. The tension that had been compressing inside me all morning, a cold, dense weight of shock and insult, transformed into pure kinetic energy. The defense was over. The attack was beginning. I closed Slack. I closed my email. I opened a new, blank document. My hands were steady, my mind perfectly clear. At the top of the page, I typed the heading: Official Notice of License Reversion and Cure Period. I was no longer August Torres, the recently fired employee. I was Torres Agricultural Research, LLC, a secured party, a creditor, and I was formally notifying Viridian Organics of their default. I began to write the letter that would start the clock. Their 72-hour countdown to irrelevance had just begun. The document was finished. It was 2 pages of dense, precise, and unforgiving legal language, citing the specific agreements, the specific breaches, and the specific, brutal consequences. This was not a plea or a complaint. It was a declaration of legal fact. My emotional response to the morning's events, the shock, the insult, had been alchemized into a cold, clear battle plan. I was no longer an employee. I was the CEO of my LLC, and it was time to execute. The systematic disassembly of Viridian's short-lived fantasy began. Step 1, the notification. I opened my Torres Agricultural Research email client, a separate and secure application. I composed a new message. The recipient list was a carefully curated collection of detonation points. 2, General Counsel, Viridian Organics, Mark Chen, Interim CEO, Julian Croft, VP Global Branding. CC, Head of Legal, Global Food Initiative, Chief Investment Officer, Blackwood Capital, Senior Partner, Vista Equity Group. I was not just informing the company of their breach. I was informing their entire financial ecosystem. The body of the email was surgically brief. To whom it may concern, it read, please find the attached formal notice regarding the immediate reversion of the licensing status for the Helios gene sequence intellectual property. All exclusivity rights are hereby suspended as per the terms of the governing breeders' rights addendum. The 72-hour cure period is now in effect. I attached the PDF and I hit send. The first domino had been pushed. Step 2, the lien. I opened a web browser and navigated to the Secretary of State's online business portal. It was a clunky gray interface, but it was a portal to immense power. I logged into my account for my LLC and located our existing UCC1 filing against Viridian Organics. I clicked File an Amendment. A simple text box appeared. I began to type, UCC3 Amendment, Acknowledgement of Default. The debtor, Viridian Organics, has triggered a default condition as outlined in Section 4C of the Governing Breeders' Rights Addendum dated May 12, 2023. The breach consists of the unnotified removal of the inventor from a leadership role and the public stripping of attribution. The secured party, Tors Agricultural Research, LLC, hereby asserts its full security interest in the specified collateral, namely U.S. Utility Patent Application 9,345,121 and all its derivatives. I submitted the form and paid the $15 filing fee. Public, searchable, permanent record of their default was now attached to the Helios patent. Any investor, partner, or auditor who did their due diligence would now see a massive red flag flapping over Viridian's most valuable asset. Step 3. The supply chain squeeze. Viridian didn't produce the Helios seeds in-house. They relied on a tripod of specialized biotech firms, AgriGen for mass germination, CryoServe for seed banking, and Phyto-Logistics for climate-controlled distribution. These companies were the foundation upon which the Helios launch operated. I drafted a new set of notices, this time addressed to the legal departments of all three. The language was carefully calibrated not to instruct them to cease services, but to create paralyzing uncertainty. This notice is to inform you, I wrote, that the intellectual property known as the Helios gene sequence, currently being propagated and distributed under contract with Viridian Organics, is subject to a legal dispute regarding ownership and licensing rights due to a contractual default by the licensee. To mitigate potential secondary infringement liability, we strongly advise that you place an immediate hold on any planned scale-up, distribution, or new contract fulfillment related to the Helios seed until the licensing status is clarified. I was injecting sand into their operational gears. The notices would trigger internal legal reviews at all three vendors, flooding Viridian's leadership with urgent calls from their most critical partners. Chaos was the objective. Step 4. The federal record. A state-level UCC filing was good. A federal record was better. I logged into the USPTO's assignment recordation system. It was another labyrinth of bureaucratic forms, but I navigated it with precision. I prepared a record of security interest. This document would formally attach the UCC lien to the patent's file in the National Patent Registry. It was the ultimate checkmate move for due diligence. From this moment on, anyone who looked up the Helios patent on the official USPTO website would see Tors Agricultural Research, LLC listed as a secured party with an active interest. It was a public and permanent stain on Viridian's claim of ownership. Step 5. Seizing the agenda. The 10:00 a.m. meeting with GFI was still on my calendar, a relic of a world that no longer existed. I would not be attending that meeting. Instead, I would be hosting a new one. I created a new calendar invitation. Time, 2:00 p.m. today. Subject, urgent material change to Helios IP license. Attendees, the full team from the Global Food Initiative, and I added a new group of attendees, the senior partners at Wexler & Stone, my own notoriously aggressive IP law firm. I sent the invitation. The message was clear. This was no longer a business update. It was a formal legal briefing, and I was coming with my lawyers. Viridian Legal's first counterattack arrived at 11:03 a.m. It was an email from Howard Finch, their general counsel, addressed to me and CCing Mark Chen and Julian. It was a perfect specimen of corporate legal intimidation, arrogant, dismissive, and completely wrong. Ms. Tors, it began, we are in receipt of your frivolous and baseless notice. Let me be unequivocally clear. All work product, innovations, and intellectual property developed by an employee of Viridian Organics during their tenure are considered work for hire, as a matter of both company policy and established law. The Helios engine is the sole and exclusive property of the company. We demand you immediately retract your erroneous communications to our partners, or Viridian will be forced to pursue all available legal remedies for tortious interference and damages. They were firing a cannon, unaware they were standing on a trapdoor. I hit reply all. I attached one file, the PDF of my provisional utility patent application, complete with its official USPTO timestamp. My reply was even shorter than Finch's email. "Mr. Finch," I wrote, "attached for your records is the utility patent application for the Helios gene sequence, filed with the United States Patent and Trademark Office on October 19, 2022. My employment at Viridian Organics commenced on May 15, 2023. That is a difference of 214 days. The work was not for hire. It was licensed under the terms of the addendum you have in your possession. Please advise." The silence that followed this email was profound. They were scrambling. I could picture the scene: Finch, red-faced, pulling up my employment file, reading the breeder's rights addendum for the first time, the one Julian had dismissed as tedious legal jargon. Their second attempt was weaker, a legal Hail Mary. At 11:34 a.m., a new email from Finch arrived. "Even if we were to entertain your theory of prior invention," he wrote, "the ShopRite doctrine would clearly apply. You utilized company resources, time, and equipment to further develop the Helios engine. Therefore, Viridian retains a non-exclusive, royalty-free license to use the technology in perpetuity." It was a decent argument if I hadn't prepared for it 2 years ago. I replied again, this time pasting a direct quote from the contract into the body of the email. "Per the executed addendum, Section 3B, this field of use license agreement is explicitly intended by all parties to supersede any and all claims of ShopRite or any other implied license that might otherwise be inferred under common law." I added one final sentence. "Your predecessors in this office signed a document that specifically waived the very right you are now attempting to claim." The terms are clear. This time, the silence was punctuated by a flash of sheer incompetence from Julian. In the public Helios launch Slack channel, a junior marketing associate, clearly confused by the morning's chaos, posted a question. "At Julian Croft, I'm updating the internal data room for the investor call. The old technical architecture documents still have A. Tors listed as architect. Should I leave that for now?" Julian's reply was a burst of pure, unthinking frustration, a message that would become Exhibit F in my dossier. "Just get August's name off everything," he wrote, for the whole channel to see. "I need a clean, unified message for the launch. Erase it now." I took a screenshot. It was a written confession, time-stamped, of the exact contractual breach that had triggered the reversion. He had just handed me a smoking gun. A moment later, a single emoji appeared in reply to Julian's message. It was from the Chief Technology Officer, a man who rarely used Slack for anything but technical directives. It was the zippermouth face. Julian must have realized what he had done. A second later, his message vanished, replaced by the faint gray text. This message was deleted. But it was too late. I took another screenshot, this one showing the deletion log and the CTO's silent, damning commentary. The 2:00 p.m. Zoom call began with a tableau of grim, anxious faces on the Viridian side. Julian was there, looking pale. Howard Finch, their lawyer, was shuffling papers off camera. Mark Chen, the CEO, looked like he'd just been pulled from a car wreck. On my side, it was just me and Alan Wexler, a razor-sharp litigator from Wexler and Stone, whose calm, predatory smile was worth every cent of his exorbitant hourly rate. The GFI team, led by a formidable woman named Anya Sharma, looked on, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and deep concern. Alan began, his voice smooth and even. He didn't make accusations. He simply read from a statement of facts I had prepared. A dispassionate, chronological telling of the morning's events, from the 9:05 a.m. notification to Julian's deleted Slack message. When he finished, a heavy silence filled the virtual room. Anya Sharma from GFI unmuted herself. She ignored Alan and me and spoke directly to Mark Chen. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice dangerously neutral. "Putting aside the contractual dispute for a moment, I have a very simple due diligence question. Who is listed as the inventor and original applicant on the USPTO filing for this technology?" The question was a perfectly aimed rifle shot. On my screen, I watched the Viridian team. Chen looked at Finch. Finch looked at Julian. Julian stared at his own hands. No one spoke. The silence stretched. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The awkwardness was becoming a physical presence. 40, 50. At 62 seconds, the silence had provided a louder answer than any words could have. I unmuted my microphone. The sound made them all flinch. "I can answer that for you, Ms. Sharma," I said, my voice steady and clear. "The applicant of record for United States Patent and Trademark Office application number 9,345,121 is a limited liability company, by the name of Tours Agricultural Research. The secured party of record for Uniform Commercial Code, filing number 2023-9821134, is also Tours Agricultural Research, LLC. Howard Finch finally spoke, his voice strained. "This is clearly a complex situation that requires further review," he stammered. "Veridian is prepared to issue a formal cure statement within 7 business days to address any." I cut him off. "Mr. Finch," I said, my voice dropping the last pretense of collegiality. "If you refer to Section 4C of the executed agreement, the document you claimed this morning was irrelevant, you will find the cure period is explicitly defined as no more than 72 hours from the time of notification. Your legal department received that notification at 10:30 a.m. this morning." I let that sink in. I could see the blood drain from their faces as the final realization dawned. "This is not an open-ended negotiation," I said, leaning into my camera. "This is a cure period. You do not have 7 days. You have 67 hours and 30 minutes left before your license to use my seed is permanently and irrevocably terminated." Anya Sharma's face was a mask of cold professional finality. "Thank you, Ms. Tours, Mr. Wexler," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "That has been exceptionally illuminating. Mr. Chen," she continued, her gaze shifting to the interim CEO. "Effective immediately, the Global Food Initiative is placing an indefinite hold on the $80 million supply contract scheduled to be signed tomorrow. All capital deployment related to this initiative is suspended pending a full, complete, and satisfactory resolution of this intellectual property ownership issue. Do not contact us. We will be in touch with our decision." Before anyone from Veridian could respond, Anya Sharma and her 2 associates vanished from the call. Their little black squares on the screen disappeared, leaving a gaping hole in the meeting. The remaining parties, me, my lawyer, and the architects of my dismissal, sat in a stunned, dead silence. I let it sit for a moment longer. Then I delivered the final, quiet blow. It was not for them. It was for the record and for the ears of the investors who would eventually listen to this recording. "The minutes of this meeting," I said, my voice calm and clear, "let the record show that Tours Agricultural Research, LLC stands ready to engage in good faith licensing discussions to ensure the continued development and humanitarian deployment of the Helios seed, as soon as the current licensing uncertainties are resolved." I then looked at Alan, and we both clicked "Leave Meeting," plunging the Veridian leadership team into a silent virtual room to contemplate the ruins of their morning. The walk to the executive boardroom on the top floor was the longest of my life. The air up here was different, thinner, quieter. Marcus and Julian walked ahead of me, a grim, silent pair on their way to the gallows. I followed at a measured pace, not as their condemned colleague, but as their executioner. As we neared the heavy oak doors of the boardroom, my personal phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message on a secure messaging app. The sender was a senior executive at Terrigen, Veridian's most hated and feared competitor. The industry's upper echelons are a small, gossipy village, and the news of Veridian's self-inflicted wound had clearly made the rounds. The message was brief. "August, heard there might be an asset coming into play. See attached." Attached was a formal 2-page letter of intent. I opened it. The terms were stunning in their simplicity and aggression. If Veridian's exclusive license for Helios was terminated, Terrigen was prepared to immediately execute a 5-year exclusive licensing deal directly with Tours Agricultural Research, LLC. The price, $80 million per year. A $400 million deal dropped into my lap at the moment of my greatest leverage. I did not reply to the message. I performed a much quieter, much more lethal maneuver. I logged into the secure online portal for the Veridian Board of Directors. As a senior scientist, I still had access. I saw the folder for today's emergency call. I uploaded a new file, the letter of intent from Terrigen. I titled the document simply, "Inbound Alternative Licensing Proposal, Helios Seed." And in the description field, I added a single crucial line of text. "Receipt acknowledged at 3:05 p.m. Proposal is subject to the termination of the current Veridian Organics license." I was not breaching my contract. I was merely informing the board of their fiduciary duty to consider all offers. I was showing them the precise $400 million cost of failing to cure the breach. We entered the boardroom. A large screen at the end of the table lit up, and the face of Harrison Croft, the chairman of the board, appeared. He was a severe man in his late 60s with cold eyes and a voice that had ended careers. He was not joined by the other board members, he was speaking for them. "I have read the documents," he said without preamble. His eyes flickered, indicating he had just seen the new file pop up in his data room. I saw a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his expression. The math was not difficult. This was no longer just about losing the $350 million pipeline. This was about handing it, gift-wrapped, to their mortal enemy. "Mr. Croft," the chairman said, his voice flat, addressing Julian, "do you have anything to add to what I've read?" Julian, summoning a final desperate burst of corporate bravado, spoke. "Mr. Chairman," he said, his voice tight, "this is clearly a monetary dispute that has been escalated unnecessarily. I believe the simplest path forward is for the company to make Ms. Torres a significant cash offer to acquire the Helios IP outright and settle this matter cleanly." He was trying to buy me, to reduce my life's work to a line item in a settlement. Before the chairman could even respond, I unmuted my microphone. "Mr. Chairman," I said, "a moment ago, I uploaded the 3 independent valuation reports for the Helios licensing pipeline conducted 6 months ago. As you know, they project a 5-year value of $350 million. Any discussion of an acquisition would, of course, have to begin at that valuation, not at the level of an employee severance package." I had just turned his offer of a cheap buyout into a 9-figure corporate acquisition, an impossible sum for them to justify. The chairman's gaze shifted to me. "Ms. Torres," he said, "the contract your counsel has repeatedly cited specifies a 72-hour cure period. In your view, what does a cure entail?" This was the moment. I did not hesitate. I laid out my terms. They were not a request. They were the price of their survival. "A cure is not a cash payment, Mr. Chairman," I began. "A cure is a complete and total restoration of the conditions under which the license was granted. Specifically, it requires 4 actions. 1. My full reinstatement, not as chief scientist, but as president of the Helios division, a new business unit with full operational and P&L responsibility. I will report directly to the board, not to the current executive leadership. 2. A permanent, irrevocable founder's attribution clause. It will be filed as a formal amendment to the Veridian corporate charter, ensuring my name can never be stripped from my work again by any future management team. 3. A public apology and formal retraction. The company will issue a press release, personally approved by me, correcting the false statements of ownership it made this morning and publicly acknowledging my role as the inventor and architect of the Helios seed. And 4, I concluded, a one-time breach of contract penalty payable to Torres Agricultural Research, LLC, equal to all legal fees incurred today, plus a liquidated damages sum of $1.5 million. This is not a buyout, it is a fine. The silence on the line was heavy. Frank, the CFO who had patched into the call, was the first to speak, his voice thin with anxiety. "Mr. Chairman, if we agree to these extensive terms, do we get the GFI deal back?" "Does this preserve the pipeline?" I answered for him. "If the cure is executed in full, and I receive signed confirmation of all 4 points before the deadline expires, I will immediately withdraw the reversion notice. The exclusive license will be fully restored. The Global Food Initiative will have its certified patent holder back in command of the project. The pipeline will be secure." The chairman's icy gaze turned to Howard Finch. "Howard," the chairman said, "is Ms. Torres' position, her interpretation of her rights under this addendum, and the consequences of failing to cure, legally sound?" Finch looked down. His shoulders were slumped. He was a man who knew he was utterly and completely outmaneuvered. He cleared his throat. "Yes, Mr. Chairman," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It is." I glanced at Julian's image on the screen. His face was a mask of disbelief and horror. The color had drained from his cheeks. In that moment, he finally understood. He thought I wanted money, a golden parachute, a quiet exit. He had built his entire strategy around the idea that my loyalty, my principles, my very identity were for sale. He was just now realizing that this was never about a payout. I didn't want their money. I wanted my truth put back in its proper place. I wanted the throne. Harrison Croft looked at his watch. "This board will now deliberate in a private session," he announced. "Mark, Julian, Ms. Torres, you will all remain available. Everyone on this line will reconvene at precisely 4:00 p.m. for our final decision. Do not be late." The line went dead. The clock was ticking. The next 20 minutes felt like a lifetime suspended in amber. At precisely 4:00 p.m., the screen flickered to life. It was not just Harrison Croft this time. It was a grid of solemn, powerful faces, the entire board of directors of Viridian Organics. And in a move of pure calculated stagecraft by the chairman, Anya Sharma from the Global Food Initiative was on the call, a silent, multi-billion-dollar juror. "This meeting of the board is now in session," Croft's voice filled the room. "We will now proceed to a final decision." He wasted no time. His gaze pinned the CFO. "Mr. Franklin, you will advise the board. Does management recommend accepting Ms. Torr's stipulated terms to cure the license default?" Frank, the CFO, did not hesitate. He was a man of numbers, and the numbers were screaming at him. "Mr. Chairman, members of the board," he said, his voice clear and urgent. "My recommendation, in the strongest possible terms, is to accept all of Ms. Torr's terms without modification or delay. The alternative is the certain termination of the exclusive license by 4:30 p.m. Friday, the immediate and permanent collapse of the GFI deal, the vaporization of the entire $350 million Helios pipeline, and, given the document I have just reviewed from Terragen, the very real probability that our primary competitor will acquire this cornerstone asset within the week. From a fiduciary and financial standpoint, any other course of action would be catastrophic." Julian lunged forward, his voice high and sharp with desperation. "Mr. Chairman, this isn't just about numbers. It's about the future of the product. I have the go-to-market strategy. I have the vision." His voice trailed off as I shared my screen. The title was simple: Attribution Breach Log, August-October. It was a spreadsheet, a cold, factual ledger of his campaign against me I had been keeping for weeks. "Leadership, Mr. Croft," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through his plea, "is not demonstrated by a pattern of systematic erasure. September 20th, submission to the Agri-Tech Innovation Summit, my name removed as co-presenter. October 3rd, internal project wiki lead architect status changed from my name to yours. October 11th, partner-facing technical brief for the cryoserve integration, all references to my work removed. There are 7 distinct instances in the last 30 days alone. The events of this morning were not an error in judgment. They were the culmination of a deliberate strategy." I stopped sharing. Julian stared at the screen, speechless. I had just presented the board with documented proof of his premeditation. Harrison Croft turned his attention to the most important person on the call. "Ms. Sharma," he said, "the board values our partnership with GFI. I ask you plainly, is your organization's investment contingent on a particular leadership structure for this project?" Anya's answer was delivered without a flicker of emotion. "Mr. Chairman," she said, "let me be clear. We are not investing in a PowerPoint deck or a go-to-market strategy. We are investing $80 million in a revolutionary piece of technology. Our investment committee's approval was and remains contingent on the singular genius who architected that technology being in full and absolute command of its destiny. We need the inventor at the helm. If Ms. Torres is not in charge, the Global Food Initiative will withdraw its offer and seek opportunities elsewhere. There is no ambiguity on this point. The execution was complete. All that remained was the sentencing. A vote was called. The motion to accept my 4 terms passed, 7-1. The chairman's tone shifted to a focused beam of execution. "Corporate Secretary, you will draft the board resolution and the employment agreement. Howard, you will file the charter amendment. PR, you will draft a new press release and send it to Ms. Torres for her sole and final approval. Frank, you will arrange the penalty payment. Move, now." It was like watching a bomb disposal unit moving with frantic, synchronized precision. At 4:26 p.m., a draft press release landed in my inbox. The headline was a masterpiece of corporate reversal. "Viridian Organics reaffirms partnership on Helios seed, appoints inventor August Torres as president." I replied with a single word: approved. At 4:31 p.m., a notification chimed softly. It was an email from the GFI Treasury Department. Subject: wire transfer confirmation, $80 million USD. The money was in. At 4:34 p.m., I sent a brief, secure message to my contact at Terragen. "The internal situation has been resolved. The license remains exclusive with Viridian. Thank you for your interest." The reply was instantaneous. "Understood. A well-played hand. Congratulations. Another time, perhaps." At 4:37 p.m., the final piece of the old regime was swept from the board. Harrison Croft addressed Julian directly. "Mr. Croft," he said, "effective immediately, you are removed from any and all responsibilities related to the Helios project. The board is placing you on a mandatory leave of absence pending the results of a formal leadership and conduct review. His screen went dark. My own lawyer's face appeared in a private chat window. August, we have it all. Signed resolution, executed contract, filing receipt for the charter amendment. You are clear. I opened the final document on my desktop, the one I had prepared that morning. Withdrawal of reversion notice. I affixed my digital signature. I glanced at the countdown clock. I stopped it. The timer froze with 42 hours, 17 minutes, and 9 seconds remaining. The war was over. Before Croft could adjourn, I unmuted my microphone one last time. Mr. Chairman, I said, one final detail. I require a company-wide email to be sent from Mark Chen's office within the hour. It will explicitly apologize for the stripping of my attribution and unequivocally reaffirm my role. Croft nodded, his expression grim. Done. I clicked Leave Meeting. The grid of faces, the boardroom, the entire chaotic universe of the call vanished. My screen went black, and in the polished dark surface, I saw my own reflection. My face was calm, my expression unchanged. There was no triumph, no joy, just the quiet, profound satisfaction of a complex equation finally, perfectly solved. I packed the last of my books into my briefcase, stood up, and walked out of the boardroom. I didn't look at Mark, who was slumped in his chair. As I passed Julian Croft's corner office, I saw a man from building services standing by the door. As I walked past, I heard a soft metallic click, the sound of the plaque bearing his name being released from its holder. I didn't turn to watch it fall. I just kept walking. My first act as president of the Helios division wasn't to review budgets or org charts. It was to call a division-wide meeting. In front of the scientists and researchers who had been my colleagues, I announced the formation of the Helios Foundation. 10% of the division's profits, I told them, would be permanently endowed to a fund dedicated to providing grants for independent, early-stage research in sustainable agriculture. It was a way to ensure that the next generation of scientists wouldn't have to make the same devil's bargains I had. It was a way to turn the truth I had fought for into a legacy for others. As I looked out at the faces in the room, I saw not just relief, but a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for the work itself. The equation wasn't just solved, it was balanced. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt the unmistakable sensation of new growth.